Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Margot Halleck, and today I am doing a little bit of a different video. Today's going to be all about pointe shoes. And so many of you guys know this about me, but I am a ballet dancer and student. A lot of people have been asking me about how I sew my shoes. And I have this trick where I sew down the sides of my shoes in order to make my feet look better. I have pretty flat feet and flat arches, so whenever there's too much fabric on a shoe, it just looks even worse. So what I do is, especially since I'm buying stock shoes, is that I sew down the sides of the shoe in order to enhance the look of my arch when I'm on pointe. And for people who don't know what this means, I have a kind of funny analogy. And I kind of explain this to my husband this way. And it's kind of like having a really low-cut V-neck shirt in order to enhance your assets. And so sewing down the sides of your pointe shoes is kind of doing the same thing. It's creating that deep V or that deep kind of dip there so that your assets, which is the arch of your foot, look even more pronounced in the shoe. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. And so this trick is actually inspired by KATHRYN Morgan, who did a video with this technique a few years ago. And she is an amazing artist, dancer, and human being, by the way. So I will put a link in the description on her video so you can see how she does it. But I do it a little bit differently. The seam of where I sew my shoes is in an area right below the drawstring of the shoe so that you cannot see it at all when it's sewn. So instead of having like this seam in the middle of the shoe, which you kind of see, in my technique you can, it just folds right underneath the drawstring so that it's invisible. And another really great benefit of that is once the sides of the shoe are sewn down, you can actually sew through that seam so that when you're tying your ribbons in elastic, or when you're sewing your ribbons in elastic, the sewing of those pieces is further securing that seam. So instead of the seam being in the middle, and every time you go up and down, it's like pulling that seam apart, if the seam is right underneath the drawstring, and you're sewing through that layer to attach your ribbons and elastic, there's no way that that seam can come apart. So I will show you that trick right now, and hopefully that will give you ideas for how to customize your shoe, especially if you're like me and you have much lower arches and a lower profile foot. Today I'll be customizing a pair of freed stock pointe shoes. Like I mentioned before, this technique allows for some customization, so you can make adjustments based on the shape of your foot, as well as your own personal preferences. I recommend using the Bunheads stitch kit or a thicker thread, since you'll want this thread to be quite durable. I also like the thicker needles that come with the Bunhead stitch kit, but any old needle will do. Thread the needle first. Keep the thread a single thread, don't double it, and make a triple knot at the end of it. It's important to know during this process that most pointe shoes have two layers of fabric, a canvas layer and a satin layer of fabric. You're going to start sewing about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch away from the seam that you see on the heel of the shoe. The closer you are to that seam, the more your heel will be lowered. Once you've figured out where to start, poke a hole right underneath the drawstring casing and take the needle through both layers of fabric, both the canvas and the satin. Pull the thread through, and remember, this should be a single thread. It shouldn't be doubled. This part is really important. You will now separate the satin fabric from the canvas fabric underneath and take the needle through the satin part of the fabric. As you'll notice, I didn't go through the inner layer of canvas of the shoe, so all I'll be going through is the satin portion. I'll be following what's known as a ladder stitch for the outside satin part of the shoe. This is basically a zigzag type pattern that goes down and across and then up and across. You'll want to keep the entire stitch work as close as you can to the drawstring casing. Let's review the pattern a little bit so you know what to do. You're going to go down and across, up and across, down and across, up and across, and so on and so forth until you reach the middle of the shoe, remembering not to go through both layers, but only the outside satin layer of the shoe. Personally, I make my vertical stitches a little bit larger as I get to the 3/4 part of the shoe, and that's just because that's where I need it the most, but you'll probably want to figure out what works best for you. Now, this is the fun part. So now that you've created all these stitches, you're going to be poking a hole back through both sides of the fabric, back to the inside portion of the shoe. Now poke the needle through right underneath the drawstring casing again and pull. Now you'll want to pull as hard as you can to gather all the fabric into a really neat seam. You can adjust a little bit afterwards to make it as neat as possible, but as you can see, the drawstring casing is hiding the seam really cleanly, so the effect is completely seamless. Add a triple knot on the inside and you'll be good to go. I recommend triple knotting because I think it's the most secure. So as you can see, this side is now significantly lower than the other side, which was how it came originally. This seam will naturally want to come apart as you go up and down from point. So the sewing of the ribbons and elastic will further reinforce that seam. So as you sew those two elements onto your shoe, make sure you try to sew through as much gathered fabric as possible. As you can see right here with my elastic, I'm going through as many layers of the gathered fabric as possible. And that's going to hold that stitch really securely when you're going up and down on point. Other than that though, sew your ribbons and elastic exactly like you would normally do it. And as you can see here, my seam is a lot more secure thanks to my ribbons and elastic. And there you go. So as you can see, it's really easy. It usually takes me about 10 minutes to do both shoes if I'm really just doing it with my full attention and not watching TV at the same time. But it's really great and it really highlights your arches. And I'm of the mindset that even if you're just taking class or dancing at home, you know, it's just wonderful to just feel a little bit better about yourself and your feet. So you don't even have to be performing anywhere to do this. It's really just do it for yourself, especially, you know, if you're self-conscious about your feet and you want to feel a little bit better. I compare it to, you know, I'm a huge red lip advocate, as you can see, and I wear my red lipstick every day, whether it's I'm staying at home or I'm just going to do my daily grocery shopping. It makes me feel good and it's for me, it's not for other people. So, you know, do the same thing with your pointe shoes. If you want to sew down the sides of your shoes and make it look beautiful, you don't need to be doing it for a performance. You can just be doing it because it makes you feel good. There's nothing wrong with that. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button below and subscribe. And yeah, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. On how to sew. Why can't I speak tonight?